Yo, how's it going guys? So I'm back in the workshop today and the plan is to convert a geared hub into a fixed gear using a Surly fixer. It took me quite a while, but I finally managed to find these two. They are both secondhand, as you can see. They've had a fair bit of use, but I'm hoping they're going to work out well. So what the Surly fixer does is it effectively replaces the existing free hub on a road or mountain bike hub and replaces it with this aluminium piece here to convert it into a fixed gear. It's a really neat design, but one of the downsides is that it only works on specific hubs that feature this Shimano interface. This design, however, was super popular in the early 2000s and featured on a majority of the hubs in the market. So there is still a lot of hubs and wheels out there that use this design. So yeah, that's just a little note if you're looking at using one. Just double check what the free hub design is, as it won't work on them all, unfortunately. So these are the two sets of wheels that I'll be converting. The first set are these Araya Super Aero rims, which are laced to Shimano 105 hubs. A really nice wheel set. These are some of my favorite rims ever made. They've got such cool graphics on them and I just love the polished look. And the other set is this Hed Superlite disc. Because this disc features the same Shimano free hub design, hopefully it's going to be a perfect fit for the Surly fixer. And that will be matched up with a specialized tri-spoke on the front. So the bike I'll be fitting them on is my Cecil Walker. Some of you may have seen the Resto rebuild video that I did on this a few years ago. I really like the geometry and also love the rad paint job on this. It's also got some crazy tubing design. It's just such a wicked bike. And here's a rough idea of what the disc might look like. Pretty excited to test these fixes out, so let's get into it. So one of the fixes had quite rough bearings, so I decided to pull it apart. So here's a little exploded view of it. So this is the main part here. It's a really cool bit of machined aluminium. You have the splined interface on the inside, which is what locks into the hub. Then on the other side is the fixed cog and lock ring threads. And on the inside is where the spacer goes, and then the bolt. And then that threads into the hub, and that bolt takes a 10mm hex key. And then the bearing is pressed in over them. The old bearing is pretty rough, so I've got this new one here, so let's get into it. Got to make sure to grease up the inside, pop the washer in, and then the bolt. Grease up the bearing and then press it in. So it seems like the bolt is getting in the way as the press needs to be up against the main kind of body. So I've just found this bigger washer that should act as a nice big spacer to clear that bolt. Sweet, so that just worked out. Nice new bearing in there, so it should work out quite nicely now. So starting off, I'll need to loosen the lock nuts and remove the axle. This side of the hub is cup and cone, so let's just pop these bearings out. Nice and easy. And then you'll need a big 10mm Allen key to remove the free hub. And there we go. That's what the spline interface should look like. You can also compare the free hub next to the fixer just to double check. Let's clean this up a bit, put some fresh grease on and then tighten it on. Just gave it a little wiggle there to make sure the splines are lined up nicely. Now I can snug it down. As easy as that. Now here's the slightly tricky part, working out the correct spacing. I'm just going to start off by fitting the drive side bearing spacer and lock nut. Slide the axle in, and then I'm going to use the original bearing spacer that came on the hub to fit on the non-drive side. So I'm just going to make a rough measurement here to make sure the axle is centered in the hub and rim. So it looks like it's just a few millimeters off, so I'll just adjust it this way a little touch more. Yeah, that looks much better now. So now I can fit the lock nut and spacer. So this is the stage that I'd usually want to measure the axle spacing to make sure it's the right width. What I'd usually do with these calipers is I'd put them through the spokes, but because this is a disc, I can't really do that. So what I'll do is I'll have to remove the wheels from the bike, double check and measure the rear spacing to confirm. And yep, it's 120. And then all I can do is just test fit the wheel to see. And yeah, it looks like it's almost a centimeter too wide. So I'll need to reduce the width. So I've just removed these spacers and we can test fit it again. So that's definitely a lot better, but it's still a few millimeters too wide. Now I can't actually remove any more of the drive side as there's only the bearing cone and lock nut. I could cut down the lock nut on the other side as it is quite long, but I don't really want to affect the wheel dish as just removing it from one side might make the rim sit further to that side. So my only real option is to find some narrower lock nuts. So I've just had a little look around and I found some spare ones that look a lot slimmer. These actually came off some MTB Hubs. So the chrome one on the right are the ones that I had on there, and the ones on the left are from the MTB track hub. So if we measure them, so this one's about 7.6, and then the other one's about 6.2, so just over a millimeter narrower. So let's chuck these ones on and test it out. That's a hell of a lot better. Still about a millimeter over, so I've just had to stretch the frame a little bit, and yeah, there we go. One thing I wasn't sure about was if the rim would be centered, but it looks pretty damn good to me. But yeah, I didn't really realize the disc has a little buckle in it. It's not too bad though. Let's get a cog and lock ring on and test it out. There we go. Looks like the chain line is pretty spot on as well. So yeah, super happy with how it's turned out on the disc. So now we can move on to the other wheels and quickly test them out as well. So one super cool thing about the fixes is that you can also convert mountain bike hubs like this one here. So this one is a Shimano Dior from I think around the early 2000s, and it features the same Freehub design. It's got a disc mount, so you could set it up fixed gear with a disc, and you could also set it up as 135mm spacing, which means you could use it to convert a 26-inch mountain bike, which is pretty damn rad. So yeah, the fixer does have quite a few options, which is pretty sweet. So now moving on to the Araya wheel set, this is basically going to be the same swap, but the only difference is the non-drive side is cup and cone bearings, unlike the head disc, which is sealed bearings on the non-drive side. It's not a big downside, but it's good to keep in mind. So one thing I did notice is that the axles and hardware were both different on both the Surly fixes that I got. I'm not exactly sure which ones are original or not, or if Surly used different parts throughout the years, but I got them secondhand, so they most likely have different hardware on them. So just bear that in mind. If you have one or do pick one up, it may have different hardware to these ones that I have. Now you might be thinking, on a wheel like this, wouldn't it be better to swap out for a proper fixed gear hub? And in some ways, yes, it would be a lot stronger to do that. But the really cool thing about the fixer is that you don't need to relace the wheel, you don't even need to redish it, and you don't need to buy a new hub and also buy new spokes and then have to lace up a wheel from scratch. You can pretty much just get the fixer, swap out the free hub, and then play around with the spacing, and then you're good to go. So just a little bit of history. The fixer came out in the early 2000s and was around for 10 or so years before they stopped making them in 2013. One of the main reasons why they stopped production was due to the new hubs moving away from that once common Shimano free hub interface, which was on a majority of the Shimano free hubs in the early 2000s. So this made the fixer compatible with less and less hubs on the market. And the other main factor was apparently the manufacturing. Because of the complexity of the design and the low production volume, it made it very expensive to produce, which put off a lot of manufacturers. But apparently there's a company called Walker Brothers that actually still make a similar one. I think they're based in the UK, but from what I've seen, they seem quite hard to get as they're out of stock a lot of the time, and they also seem to be a bit more expensive than what the Surly ones used to be. But yeah, definitely good to know that there's still a company out there still making them. So it's a lot easier to measure the spacing on a spoked wheel. I also had to use narrow lock nuts on this one as well, but looks like I got it just about 120 mil. So let's test fit this wheel set. So it looks like this one worked out perfectly as well. No need to redish or adjust the wheel or the chain line. Pretty weird looking at a road hub on a fixed gear, but it's also pretty damn rad. Would be sweet to get a nice old Dura-Ace road hub to test out as well. But yeah, there we go. Let me know which wheel set you prefer on this bike. I'm definitely going to go with the discs for now, mainly because I want to test them out. I'm also interested to see how well the spline interface holds up with fixed gear riding, and hopefully it's not an area that might generate a little bit of play, but I guess we'll find out soon. And there's the old free hubs. That's 2 geared wheel sets now converted to fixed. Pretty keen to test out a fixer on a 26 inch at some point, so yeah, I'll have to give that a go. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for the fixer. Let me know if you guys have used the fixer before. Pretty keen to hear your experiences. And yeah, thanks again so much for watching, guys, especially if you've made it all this way. It really does mean a lot. I think it's time to go test out these wheels and this fixer. So I'll catch you all next time. Peace.